My name is Athena, and I'm 29 years old. 3 months ago, my whole world nearly ended in the living room of my mother-in-law's house, and I still don't know how I survived that night with my mind intact. I need to tell you everything, from the beginning, because what happened afterward is something I never expected, not even in my worst nightmares. My husband Julian and I moved into his mother's house 8 months ago, right after I found out I was pregnant. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. We'd lost our apartment when the building was sold, and with a baby coming, Julian thought it made sense to save money by staying with his mother, Rosalind, until we could afford a place of our own. I agreed, even though something in my gut told me it was a mistake. I just didn't know how big of a mistake it would turn out to be. Rosalind was polite to my face in the beginning. She helped me pick out a crib. She smiled in photos. But underneath all of that, I could feel her watching me, judging every decision I made, every bite of food I ate, every hour I slept. When I gave birth to our daughter Nora 7 weeks early, Rosalind's true colors started showing almost immediately. She said I was too soft with the baby. She said I coddled her too much. She said crying built character, even in an infant barely 5 pounds. I tried to brush it off as an older generation's way of thinking. I told myself she meant well, that she just didn't understand how fragile a premature baby really was. Julian worked long hours at his construction job, often 12-hour shifts, so most nights it was just me and Rosalind in that house, along with a newborn who needed constant care. Nora had colic. She screamed for hours some nights, no matter what I did, no matter how I rocked her or fed her or changed her. The doctor said it was normal, that it would pass, but nothing about those nights felt normal to me. The night everything changed started like most of them did. It was almost midnight, and Nora had been crying for nearly 2 hours straight. I was exhausted beyond anything I'd ever felt in my life, rocking her in my arms, walking circles around the nursery, whispering to her, begging her softly to calm down. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. My arms ached. And then I heard Rosalind's footsteps coming down the hallway, fast and heavy, nothing like her usual careful pace. She threw the door open so hard it hit the wall. Her face was twisted with a rage I had never seen from her before, not once in 8 months. She started screaming at me, telling me I was a terrible mother, that I couldn't even control my own child, that the entire house hadn't slept in weeks because of me. I tried to explain, tried to tell her that Nora had colic, that this was normal for premature babies, but she wasn't listening. She wasn't hearing anything I said. Before I even understood what was happening, her hand came across my face so hard that my ears rang and my vision went white for a second. I stumbled backward, my arms instinctively tightening around Nora, but the impact of the slap combined with my exhaustion made my knees buckle. I lost my footing, and in that split second, the thing I feared most in this world happened. Nora slipped from my arms and hit the floor. The sound she made when she landed will haunt me until the day I die. It wasn't even a cry. It was a horrible, choking silence, and then nothing at all. I dropped to my knees, screaming her name, shaking her gently, praying, begging her to open her eyes, to make any sound at all. Rosalind stood over us, and instead of helping, instead of showing even a flicker of horror at what had just happened, she snapped at me in a voice colder than anything I'd ever heard. She told me to shut the baby up, or get out of her house. I don't remember deciding to move. I don't remember grabbing my keys or my phone. All I remember is running out into the cold night air with my daughter limp in my arms, driving faster than I ever had in my life, running red lights, screaming at every car that dared slow me down. The emergency room doors hadn't even fully opened before nurses were pulling Nora from my arms, rushing her back through double doors that swung shut right in front of my face. I stood there in the waiting room, my cheeks still throbbing, my hands shaking uncontrollably, staring at those doors, waiting for someone, anyone, to come tell me my daughter was going to be okay. And then, after what felt like an eternity, a doctor walked out, his expression unreadable, and he looked directly at me and said the words that made my entire body go numb. He said, Your daughter is already stable, but we need to run more tests to be sure there's no internal damage." Those were the words that finally finished the sentence that had frozen my entire world in place. Stable. Not the word I feared most. Not the word that would have shattered me completely. I sank into the nearest chair, my legs no longer able to hold me up, and I sobbed harder than I had ever sobbed in my entire life, right there in the middle of that waiting room, in front of strangers, in front of nurses, in front of anyone who cared to look. The doctor, a tired-looking man named Dr. Whitfield, sat down beside me and explained that Nora had a mild concussion from the fall, along with some bruising, but that infants were surprisingly resilient in situations like this. He said they wanted to keep her for observation for at least 48 hours to monitor her closely. Then he looked at my face, at the redness still blooming across my cheek from the slap, and his expression shifted from professional concern to something more serious. He asked me directly what had happened. I remember sitting there, frozen, torn between the instinct to protect my husband's family and the reality of what had just happened to my daughter. But looking at Nora through the glass of the observation room, tiny and hooked up to monitors that beeped steadily beside her, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I told him everything. The slap, the fall, the words Rosalind screamed at me as I ran out the door. Dr. Whitfield's jaw tightened, and he told me that as a mandated reporter, given the injury to an infant, he was required to contact the authorities. I didn't argue. Part of me felt relief wash over me the moment he said it. I called Julian from the hospital hallway, my voice barely steady enough to form words. When he arrived 20 minutes later, his face pale and his hands trembling, I told him everything that had happened in that nursery. I watched something break behind his eyes, a kind of realization I don't think he'd ever let himself have before about his own mother. He didn't defend her. He didn't make excuses. He just sat down next to me outside Nora's room and put his head in his hands, and for a long time, neither of us said anything at all. The police arrived at the hospital within the hour to take my statement. 2 officers, calm and thorough, asked me to walk them through every detail. I told them about the slap, about Nora falling, about Rosalind's chilling words afterward, telling me to shut the baby up or leave her house. They documented the mark still visible on my face, and photographed it as evidence. Then they told me they would be heading to Rosalind's house that same night to speak with her directly. Nora stayed in the hospital for 2 days. Those were the longest 2 days of my life. Sitting beside her crib, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, praying every single hour that the doctors were right, that she would fully recover, that this wouldn't leave any lasting damage. On the second night, she opened her eyes and looked right at me, and for the first time since that terrible moment in the nursery, I felt like I could breathe again. While we were still in the hospital, I learned that Rosalind had been formally charged: assault and endangering the welfare of a child. Apparently, this wasn't the first complaint filed against her either. A neighbor mentioned to the investigating officers that they'd heard shouting from that house on other occasions, though no one had ever called it in before that night. It turned out my instincts about her from the very beginning had been right all along, and I had ignored them because I wanted to believe the best about the woman who raised my husband. Julian didn't hesitate for even a second when it came to choosing between his mother and his family. Within a week of Nora coming home, he had found us a small apartment across town, and we moved out for good. He hasn't spoken to Rosalind since that night, and honestly, neither have I. Some bridges once burned that violently aren't meant to be rebuilt, especially not when your child's safety is what's at stake. Nora is doing wonderfully now. The doctors confirmed there was no lasting damage from the fall, and every single day I watch her grow a little more, smile a little brighter, and I thank whatever force in this universe made sure that doctor walked out and said the words, "She's stable," instead of the words I feared most. That night nearly broke me, but it also showed me exactly what kind of mother I am willing to become, one who will never again stay silent to protect someone who hurt my child. If this story moved you the way it moved me to live it, please hit that subscribe button and join our community. There are so many more real stories like mine still to come, and I promise you, you won't want to miss a single one.